In this video we want to talk about the business plan, and this particular video will give an overview of the business plan. Just talk about what it is, what it's used for, what's contained in it. Very superficial type of treatment, just introducing the business plan. There are more detailed videos on this topic elsewhere in the course. So the business plan should contain three types of information. First of all, it should specify the objectives of the business. What is the business trying to achieve? What's the business trying to do? What's the raison d'etre for the business? What's it doing? It should have a statement of the strategies that will be used to achieve the objectives. So it must be appreciated that strategies do change over time, and strategies are coloured by what's happening in the market, by what the competitors are doing, or what the government's doing, or what the local authorities, the local government, or even the local communities are doing. So it's not possible to state strategies for all time. But at the time of writing the business plan, there should be some idea about the strategies that are going to be followed, at least, let's say, for the next 6 months, or maybe year, for the next year. And those strategies should be specified in the plan and should be discussed in the plan, and why the strategies are there and what they're aiming to achieve. It should also have a statement of the various constraints facing the business. These may be financial constraints, or production, marketing, or some other human resource, or whatever it is. So the company will face constraints. It could be the company is going through an expansionary phase, or it's just in the setup phase, and it may be perhaps short of finance. And financial resources are important for it to enable production, or give it time to pay necessary expenditures, for example salaries, whilst it's waiting to get established. So the business may have financial requirements, and these will be constraints on its activities. But there could also be production constraints. Perhaps the company needs a very particular machine, but it can't afford that machine at the moment, so it has to work around the problem by perhaps configuring other machines to do the task in various stages. So there should be a statement talking about the constraints and how the business is dealing with those constraints. It's understandable that any business will have constraints. So the business plan should be honest and open about what sort of constraints confront the business and how the business is dealing with them. Now, the business plan itself, well, it forces the entrepreneur to think through the commercial issues that will affect the running and viability of the business. So the business plan, it's a good document because it forces the entrepreneur, or the senior manager, whoever's in charge of the business, it forces that person to think about the business, to think about it critically and also logically, and make sure that there is a realistic understanding of what's required to run the business and to ensure the business's survival. So it forces the entrepreneur to think through all of the problems that it may confront, and have strategies or have some ideas about how to deal with problems should the problems arise. And it should deal with issues related to areas such as marketing, competitors, and customer satisfaction. Clearly, the plan must have sections on those. If it doesn't get the marketing correct, it's not going to have sales, and if it doesn't have sales, it's not going to exist. But the competitors are not complacent. The competitors are not passive. The competitors are active players. They will want to compete with the business and to beat the business, to take the customers. And of course the customers themselves should look at the product or output of the business and consider it to be good quality and desirable. The plan should also have something on recruitment of personnel, key personnel, and remuneration, and look at all of the issues surrounding the employment of personnel. So, for example, it should have something on training, health and safety, involvement, motivation, perhaps even have something on leadership, some statements on how the business will be led, but also talk about remuneration and talk about contracts, employment contracts. So quite a detailed backdrop on the HRM side. And then look at finance, pricing, budgets, cash flow, gearing, the amount of resource it borrows as a proportion of its total resources. So what sort of gearing does the business have? So again, realistic figures and dealt with as openly as possible, so that there is a good understanding, a good realism about the business's financial position. But it should also have something on technology, innovation, distribution, capital and production. It should talk about how it's going to organize itself to produce perhaps a product or produce a service, what capital is required and how the product will be distributed, and what sort of policy has it got towards innovation and technology. Has it done anything to mark it off from others in terms of innovation? Is it doing something differently, perhaps more efficiently? Secondly, business plans show the nature, constraints and aspirations of the business. These are much more general statements, but the business plan should indicate the route in which the business is going to travel. It should talk about the aspirations, the desires of the entrepreneur and of the senior management. In which way are they going to move the business? Where will it be in 5 years or in 10 years' time? Where do they hope it will be? And what are the problems in getting it there? What constraints are they likely to encounter? The plan is used to raise finance and structure and prioritize the procedures of the business. One of the functions of the business plan is to ensure that outside agencies, for example the banks, will be able to read about the business, understand the business, understand that the business plan was put forward in good faith. It is attempting to be as honest as it can and as open as it can, and it's presenting a realistic picture of its position. And then the banks can consider making loans or some sort of provision, financial provision for the business based on that information and based on the assumption that the information in the business plan is accurate. So it's used to raise finance, and it's also a good document to structure the business, because the business has been planned out. It's the business plan. So the plan states how the business will be structured. Perhaps what are the functional areas of the business? Who's in charge? And how do the various functional areas link to each other? And have some appreciation of the efficiency of the business in that linkage. The planning exercise helps to clarify the nature and functioning of the business. However, it's a continuing exercise. The business plan is certainly needed at startup stage, but it's good practice to update the business plan, perhaps on an annual basis. because the world is not a static environment. The world does change. The markets change. The products change. The number of competitors change. Government policy changes. So the world is quite dynamic, and there are many forces in play that are changing continuously. And that means that an update of the business plan on a frequent basis, perhaps every year, to bring it up to date with what's happening in the environment, in the business environment, bring it up to date, that is good practice. But it helps to clarify the nature and functioning of the business. It gives a clear picture of the position of the business and what the business is aiming to do and how it's going to do it. It's a working document that needs to be constantly updated. But it is a working document. It's not just done for the sake of doing it. It's a document that should drive the business. It's one that should be consulted, and it should be quite elaborate in that sense. It's a set of rules. It's also a roadmap for the management. They're able to know where they're going, how they're going to move the business over time, how they're going to change the business, how they're going to invest and innovate and change the product and the pricing strategy and so on. So it's actually a working document. It's not done just for the sake of having a business plan. It must be honest in the sense that it would make explicit problems and difficulties facing the business as well as positive points. So it should be honest in the sense it confronts the real problems, whatever the problems the business faces. Intense competition, let's say, it should face that up. It should write it up and discuss strategies to deal with it. It should look at the various difficulties that the business will have, perhaps difficulty in recruiting the right type of personnel with the right skills, or finance problems, how to overcome finance problems. And it should have all of those with associated strategies, associated ways forward attached. But also it should look at the positive points. The business was started to achieve a certain set of objectives, perhaps a certain growth rate or a certain level of profits, or it depends on what it was set up to do, and it should discuss those as well. So it should be balanced, and the overarching concern is that the document is realistic and honest. Now, some summary points to remember about the business plan. Well, it's a description of the current activities and financial position of the business. It's often referred to as a situational audit. In other words, it simply talks about where the business is and what it's doing and what it's going to do and how it's configured. It's a statement of the objectives of the business. Now, these objectives of the business may include, say, increasing profits, or its views about innovation and how to modernize the business and keep the business up to date. It could also have issues associated with cost reduction, keeping costs under control, not just allowing the business to grow and allowing inefficiencies or unnecessary tasks or procedures to creep in over time. So there should be control of costs. A detailed statement of the strategies to be pursued should also be included in the business. I said it earlier, it's worth noting that the business plan is really a roadmap of the way in which the business is configured and where it's going. It shows how to get there. It's a roadmap. So what it needs to do is to ensure that its aspirations are realistic and achievable, and also that the policies that it's going to follow, the strategies it's going to follow, are realistic in the environment in which it finds itself. So if it finds itself in a highly competitive market, It should be looking towards innovation, change of product, customer contact, customer liaison, customer satisfaction. And perhaps that's the way to deal with it, because there are very little opportunities for price variations. If there are very few producers in the market, it may have more latitude over its price. But again, it should not take anything for granted. And it should be aware that perhaps the market is contestable, that if it is making large profits, it'll be an inducement for others to join the market. So it should have a detailed statement of strategies, and these should be both realistic, well thought out, and above all relevant to the business that's portrayed in the business plan. So what strategies should be followed and why? The what and why. Not all strategies will be relevant. Only strategies relevant to the business and to the position it finds itself in. So what strategies should be followed and why should they be followed? When one is selected, what are the strengths associated with that strategy? Don't just pick a strategy and say that's it. There must be a rationale for it. There must be a logic underpinning it. Why that one? Explain why the particular strategy was selected. How should the strategies be implemented? Where and when should this take place? So how should the strategies be implemented? It's okay to have a strategy. It's good to have a strategy, but the strategy needs to be implemented. So how should it be implemented? What will be the forces that oppose the implementation? There may be HR issues. There may be personnel within the organization who resist that particular strategy. So how should it be implemented? How should it be brought into play? And will it be brought into play across the whole organization or within just perhaps some departments? The where? And when should this take place? What's the right timing to start implementing the particular strategy? When should it happen? The plan must accurately state the current financial state of the business, as I mentioned earlier. It must also carefully cost any proposed changes and anticipated accruing benefits. So it should accurately talk about the financial position of the business, whether that's precarious or whether that is in surplus and there's latitude for the business to expand or implement different strategies. But it should be realistic, honest and open in the business plan about its financial position. And it should carefully cost any proposed changes. When the change is being mooted, someone wants a change, one of the managers or the CEO or the original entrepreneur who may be different, whoever proposes the changes, they should be costed and compared with the likely benefits. I say likely because they don't know what the benefits are. Benefits occur in the future. The expenditure may occur today. So if the company decides to implement a change today, it may incur the cost of that change today, but the benefits from the change may not arise for a long time. So those sort of proposals have to be worked out carefully in the business plan. So as you can see, there are quite a few issues to be dealt with in the topic of business planning. This is just an overview. This needs to be looked at in much more detail, and there are many more videos on the topic available on the course. But that's all we're going to deal with here, so let's leave it at that and say thank you for watching.